Emily Mashak, and today I am sitting down with John McGuire, a CSU horn professor, to talk about the International Horn Competition of America. Thanks for coming in today, John.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So to start off, I just want to clarify, we're talking about French horns, right?
That's correct. Yes,
okay.
French horn.
So the brass, all the trumpets, trombones, tubas, anything like that?
None of them, no.
Not a horn?
We don't recognize those other instruments.
Okay, gotcha. Sounds good. Just making sure, because I'm not the expert in this topic. But I want to start off with you specifically. How did you end up being a horn professor? What got you started with the French horn?
Well, it's a bit of a long and winding road. It wasn't something that I necessarily ever planned for, but as a lot of kids did back in beginning band in sixth grade, I picked up the French horn. I didn't even know what it was, but I was told that I had talent on it. So after trying it out, and begrudgingly played it for a few years, and then eventually got serious about it. Ended up going to college and going all the way through my bachelor's and master's and doctorate. In between some of those, doing a lot of freelancing, professional playing with orchestras around the country and whatnot, touring around the world. And eventually just kind of, started teaching on my own freelance and eventually started teaching at universities, and not only discovered that I had, a bit of ability for it, but, actually enjoyed doing it. So now I say that I'm a teacher and a mentor, and music and the French horn are just simply the mediums through which I do that.
Yeah, that's great. Do you play any other instruments?
No.
Nope.
French horn is complicated enough in my mind.
I bet. What was it that made you really stick with it? Go from just playing in bands to being a
I think
professional?
initially part of it was, there was a certain competitive aspect to it. When you're competing with other kids or other players, to get a better chair, higher chair in band or whatever. And then, and then eventually you start, as a teenager, you look for ways to find your own voice and to express yourself. And I found that music was something that I could use to express myself in ways that, I wasn't able to do through words. So, and then it just kind of took off from there.
So let's talk about the International Horn Competition of America.
Yes.
There we go. The IHCA.
That's correct.
There we go. It's a little bit of a mouthful, so just making sure. What makes this competition so important?
Well, a number of things. Number one, it is one of the oldest and longest running solo French horn competitions in the world. One of the largest as well, and one of the most prestigious. It's been going on for close to 45 years now, which in the world of brass instruments is a very long time. Brass instruments have not historically been known as the same level of soloistic instruments as instruments like the violin or the piano or things like that. But this, like I said, this particular competition has been around for well over 4 decades now. It is the second largest in solo competition for horn in the world. It is typically most of the time it's held every other year, so it's an event that's held every couple of years, and it's adds a little bit more weight to it than perhaps something that is held on an annual basis. If you were to go down and if you were familiar with a lot of the who's who in the French horn world across the globe, you would see that the list of winners over the last 40 plus years of this competition is just that veritable list of who's who in our horn world. Very famous players, people who at the time maybe weren't famous but went on and used this competition as kind of a launching pad for very, very successful international solo careers as well as orchestral careers.
It's kind of the gateway to being the best of the best.
Absolutely.
Did you ever participate in it when you were a student?
I did, actually. There are 2 divisions. There's a professional division and there's a university division. I have competed many years ago in both of those divisions. As a student, I was a finalist in the competition back in 1997. But back in those days, it was called the American Horn Competition. So it's since changed its name, but the organization and competition are still the same.
What's it like being in the competition?
Oh, wow. Incredibly nerve-wracking. It's a 3-round competition that takes place over the span of about 3 to 4 days. You can have, well over 100 people from around the world competing against, but it's if you've ever found a reason to be, or a situation where you've been highly focused and just, laser beam focus on whatever your task is, you'll know that at the end of it, whether it's, a few minutes or an hour or whatever, you end up being physically, mentally, emotionally exhausted. We'll extend that out over 3 or 4 days nonstop. And it can be, a lot of it can be the kind of thing where you just walk out and you're just completely spent. So it's a highly stressful situation, but if you're able to keep your nerves, in check and focus on your music, it's actually a very incredibly rewarding and fulfilling experience.
Yeah, it's a great way for students to be recognized for something that
absolutely.
isn't a typical job you can just go get. That's great. That's great.
Definitely.
So CSU won the competition in 2017, correct?
Well, we hosted the competition.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, we hosted it. It's individual competitors from around the world, literally.
I see.
So, and we hosted it in 2017. We awarded it in 2015. And so because it's held every other year, then the next version was 2017. And that year went so well that the board of the competition came back to CSU and asked if we could host it a second time. So we're hosting it a second time.
That must be a good feeling.
It is, but I will definitely be glad to pass the torch along to somebody else. It's quite an undertaking, that's for sure.
I bet. Is it almost more stressful to be a mentor now than to be in the competition?
That's an interesting question. I think in some regards, yes, and in some regards, no. No, from the standpoint of, I don't have to get out there on stage and compete in front of the world, but some of my students are. And as a teacher and as a mentor, I believe that a good student or a good a teacher will give absolutely everything they can to help their students succeed. So when you have that kind of mental and emotional investment in individual students, and a number of them, you're living every high and every low on stage that they're going through, and maybe even more. They may not necessarily realize it at the time, but when you're sitting there in the audience listening to your students, it can be, your heart is pounding just as hard as theirs is.
How is the team preparing this year for the upcoming competition?
I think probably with more experience, they just simply know what to expect. A lot of times you get out on big stages, whether it's some sort of a high-level professional audition or a competition like this is, or even just a performance of some sort, a big, important performance. Sometimes the fear of the unknown can take over. One thing that we've worked on, really hard with the CSU Horn Studio, is getting all of our students these kinds of experiences. First time is never easy, but the first time is necessary if you want to go out and compete and potentially win the second or the third or the fourth time. So it's a step, it's a process.
For people who want to go to the event, is this open to the public?
Absolutely, yes. One of the things that we are, as a competition, we promote is, trying to expand exposure to audiences of, what is a terrific body of repertoire for our instrument that a lot of people maybe don't necessarily know about. And part of getting that out there is to just make absolutely every single performance, from the very first one in the first round through the final round, make everything free and open to the public. So no tickets are required. All you have to do is just show up.
And it's from August 29th to September 1st?
Yes, the August 29th is a Thursday. That's just a rehearsal day for all of the competitors with their piano accompanists. But the competition itself will be Friday, August 30th through Sunday, September 1st.
At the University Center for the Arts.
That is correct, yes.
Which room?
The university division will be in the organ recital hall on the second floor, and the professional division will be in Griffin Concert Hall.
After the competition, what's next for the Hornets of CSU?
Well, that's, the competition happens the very first week of classes, so they have, they're kind of going in 100 different directions. I was just joking with one of my colleagues that after Labor Day, after this competition, all we have to do is just simply be students and teachers. We don't have to worry about everything else. So it'll hopefully feel a little bit of a, like a little bit of a relief. Hopefully the rest of the semester will feel, downhill from that point on. Yeah. All they have to do are be college students at that point.
That's good. You can take a breather.
Yeah, of sorts.
Yes, of sorts, until the next time.
Exactly.
What is your advice for playing the horn? Like, any advice, I guess, for aspiring musicians out there who want to pick it up?
Well, yeah, I think this comment probably goes beyond just horn, but obviously for our purposes of this conversation, do it because you love it. Playing an instrument, and specifically French horn, is difficult enough, and it will be stressful. The whole blood, sweat, and tears thing is absolutely true in music and on a brass instrument. It's not worth it unless you are just absolutely fully committed. And the way to be the most fully committed is to love what you do. What we do is not something that you can necessarily quantify. It's not the kind of thing where you can check boxes necessarily, and at the end of the day, look at all the boxes you've checked and necessarily feel good. It's a very abstract thing. So, the more that you can feel fulfilled, the more that you can enjoy what you're doing, the more your audiences are going to enjoy it as well. And when you walk off stage at the end of the day, you put your horn in the case and you put your head down on your pillow to go to sleep, knowing that you've made a difference, for yourself, for your audiences from an artistic standpoint. There really aren't words to describe that. There's not a way to quantify that.
I can tell you're passionate about it too.
Absolutely.
Just, listeners, you can't see his face, but he is. Trust me.
Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't love it.
That's great. Bigger picture question.
Yes.
I know that the arts aren't always recognized as highly in universities and in general as perhaps sciences or engineering.
Right.
Why do you think it's important to have the arts in schools and in society?
Wow. How much time do we have?
Yeah, go first.
That's a big question. But I guess short answer is, music and the arts teach you a number of things that are important or can be important to be highly successful in just about any other career. First and foremost, it teaches you determination over a very long period of time, determination and commitment. I frequently tell my students that we live in a society today where, it's a very instant gratification kind of society. You can have almost anything you want at the click of a mouse. But what we do as an art form is a very 19th century trade. It's not something that you can necessarily conceive of, an idea or an artistic vision and snap your fingers and it happens. You have to work towards it over days and weeks and months and in many cases years. So it does take a certain commitment and long-term vision. Additionally, I would say that with the arts, and music is one example of this, it takes learning how to work with others, how to be a team, how in order to achieve your goal. It very rarely are artists in any discipline successful solely on their own merits. Most successful artists in any field have to work for a very long time and rely on people around them, to help them, to guide them, to work with them in various capacities over all those many years. So being a team player, I would say those are probably the two biggest things.
Really instills lifelong values.
Yeah, absolutely. It teaches you how to not just function in different professional capacities, but just function in society and in life. I think that a lot of the ills that plague our world today could probably be solved if everybody would just be forced to sit down and make music together or create art together. And I think that if we did that, we would probably alleviate a lot of suffering in our world.
Well, it's great that the CSU students are doing their part to work at least towards that a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm so proud of them.
That is great to hear. CSU horn professor John McGuire, thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, if you would like to hear all of these talented students, you can attend the International Horn Competition of America at the University Center of the Arts starting Friday, August 30th.